keep things moving here on the program. We're going to talk some NBA. And, of course, you know if we're talking NBA, we're talking with Mike Wallace, senior editor of Grind City Media. Check them out. They do all kinds of things. Of course, it's about the Memphis Grizzlies, but HBCU coverage, college coverage. They've got the entire gamut covered. Podcast all over the place. The HBCU Huddle podcast is off the chain. It's Mike Wallace joining us here on the program. What's going on, Mike?
Hey, what's going on, brother? Good to be on with you anytime, man, and especially this time of year where there's so much going on across the gamut of sports, man. It's a blessing to be on with you, man, so thank you.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. 10 to 12 games left in the NBA. I mean, there's so many different ways we can go with this. I want to start here because I'm trying to figure out, and look, I mean, the Celtics from start to finish have been the best team in the NBA. But
yeah,
you have what has happened against Atlanta, earlier in the week. And so what do you make? I mean, and we've seen the Celtics not do as well in the playoffs maybe as we thought they may be over the last couple of years. What do you make of the Celtics?
As you were saying, start to finish, they've been the class of the NBA, the most consistent team in the NBA throughout the season. They just keep running into these teams, every, couple of weeks where they have a hiccup. You're talking about the Atlanta Hawks, man, for them to be able to be up as much as they were on the Hawks and then give that game away. That's a bad tendency. They also are 0-2 against the defending champion Denver Nuggets. Denver went into Boston and beat them when they had that home court streak going to start the season. And then they beat them in Denver when Boston needed to go in there and prove something to the team that has the NBA trophy right now, the championship trophy. So listen, if you're asking me which team would I be most willing to feel comfortable going out on a limb and saying we'll win a championship, it's going to be Boston and Denver meeting in the finals. That's my safest pick right there. And Boston still has to prove to me that they can beat Denver. But what I make of that team is that they're the strongest collection of starters and reserves coming off the bench, 2-3 guys coming off the bench that we have in the NBA right now. And if they do not win a championship, they are truly a championship or bust. As Jason Tatum said during an appearance, I believe it was on TNT, everybody's gotten paid. Like all of their top guys that are in the peak of their primes are on max contracts. Some of their veterans that are long in the tooth have already had max contracts before. They're just trying to get championships. And their bench and their role players are eager to go ahead and get that championship run too. So they have everything. They don't have any excuse. They got to go ahead and win this thing this year if we're ever going to believe in what this team can do as a championship team.
30-point lead against. I mean, I could understand if it was Denver or maybe even Milwaukee or whomever, even if it was the Lakers, right? It was no disrespect to the Hawks, but it was the Hawks. I good players, but it's the Hawks late in the season. And that's not the only loss. Like we've had some others this year.
Mm-hmm.
Why do the Celtics have these kind of losses?
You're talking about the one that obviously is the most recent one is the loss to the Hawks. You go back a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, they had a loss to the Los Angeles Lakers that was playing without LeBron and Anthony Davis, right? They were missing both of those guys. And they went in there and beat Boston at home. You know what I mean? So, you have situations where Boston, it seems like they get bored with the season a little bit and they kind of go through the motions until they get smacked in the face. And then they realize, oh, wow, we're in the middle of a dogfight right now. Let's try to pull this out. That's just a tendency of a team getting bored. Golden State kind of went through it outside of that season when they set the NBA record for, 71, 72 wins. Chicago Bulls used to go through it. They would have a random loss to, a Cleveland Cavaliers or somebody like that, on their schedule when Jordan and the Bulls were rolling. These dominant teams would have these little lulls because the NBA season is long. 82 games is a long stretch to be playing at your best night in and night out. So every once in a while, there's a schedule loss that comes along. And you got to, just understand that it's a hiccup and you keep moving. Boston always regroups from those type of things and go on another run. And this one, they just trying to finish out the season. They pretty much clinched the number 1 seed at this point in the East. They're going to probably start resting some of their guys to get ready for that 1A matchup. They'll get a long week off for the play-in to finalize and finish out. And then we'll see if this team has the championship medal that we all believe and think that they have.
Mike Wallace is the senior editor of Grind City Media. He joins us here on the program as we talk some NBA. We've got about a week and a half, couple of weeks left in the season, 10 to 12 games for the teams. The Bucks lost to Los Angeles on Tuesday. The Bucks are interesting.
Talk about blowing a big lead. They blew a 19-point lead to a LeBron James-less Los Angeles Lakers team. And oh, by the way, these Lakers, came into this after that game. They moved to 4-2 this season in games that LeBron has missed, or 6-4, or something like. They're 2 games over 500 in games that LeBron has missed. First time in LeBron's decorated 21-year career that his team had a winning record in games that he did not play. So that says something about these Lakers, man. But I didn't mean to interrupt your question. I just wanted to provide a little context to what you were about to say, regarding the Milwaukee Bucks.
It's good context. Last time we had you on the program, we were talking about Doc Rivers. They couldn't figure it out. Then the Bucks figured it out, and now you have a not the same situation as the Celtics, but we're talking about the 2 best teams in the East. What do you make? I mean, what do you make of the Bucks heading into the playoffs?
They're so shady. I see the names. I see Dame Lillard. I see Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's putting up tremendous stats again, and is probably not getting enough MVP discussion and consideration. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because this might be the most hotly contested MVP race that I've ever seen in 20-plus years of being around this league. It's just something off about the Bucks, man. They have so many moving parts. They still don't have really an identity. They were a bad defensive team earlier. They got much better once they made some of these trades and got, Pat Beverly and those guys in. It's almost like they're still searching for combinations that work for them. Chris Middleton has been in and out. He's been hurt, banged up. He hadn't gotten all the way back to what he needs to be. So there's still some questions that you got to ask about the Bucks. But that is a team that made the trade for Damian Lillard to win a championship. It wasn't just to get back to the finals. It was to win it all. And I think that if that team does not get to at least the Eastern Conference Finals, there's going to be some strong looks in the mirror to figure out what they need to do to turn this thing around, because Dame doesn't have a lot of time. Giannis is locked up now. He signed that long-term extension. But as we saw, he's not afraid to do things and make kind of some maneuvers and some statements to get a coach out of there if he needs to get a player out of there if he needs to. So he doesn't have a lot of patience for coming up short in the playoffs.
From what you've seen from the Cleveland Cavaliers, can the Cavaliers challenge in the playoffs? Can they make a deep playoff run?
They should. They are my dark horse in the East. And, as much as I love the grit and the competitive fire that the Knicks have and the streakiness that they are, I think the team that's the scariest that most people would not want to play will be Cleveland, because they have a dynamic way of beating you in 120, 125 point scoring games. They can also beat you in a slugfest at 89 to 86 if it has to go down to that. Now, the question, though, and the key is they have to have their guys on the floor. Karis LeVert is going to be considered for Sixth Man of the Year coming off that bench. Donovan Mitchell has been banged up coming down the stretch of the season, so he's going to have to get healthy. They're going to have to keep both Jarrett Allen and their power forward. Why is his name escaping me? But they're going to have to keep him on the floor as well in order to make sure that they can Evan Mobley, so to make sure that they can be at their full potential. But that team has a little bit of everything. Garland is ready to go. Donovan Mitchell, if he's healthy, that's another 30-point per game guy who's been into the playoffs. This team is a scary team if they're healthy, and they're as good as anyone in the East when they're right. They just have to make sure they go in right. They don't have any margin for error among the top contenders there, and they don't, because they don't have that experience and that collective playoff experience that they need. But this team has everything they have on paper to be a scary team in the East to contend with.
Mike Wallace is the senior editor of Grind City Media. He joins us here on the program to talk some NBA. The Suns are interesting because they in the beginning just playing well below what we would have expected. Then went on a nice little run. Matter of fact, I had a chance to be at that game in San Francisco, the Warriors and Phoenix and Suns game where the Suns lost that game. But boy, that was a big time shot by Steph. And now, you know, the Suns are back down again. What do you make of the swings of the Suns this year?
You know, it's sometimes you can put together quality pieces and they just don't fit or they struggle to fit. We know individually Devin Booker is a top 10 player in this league. Kevin Durant is a Hall of Famer that's going to be considered a top 15 player, top 20 player of all time. You know, Bradley Beal is one of the better guards and, you know, better scoring threats that we have in the league at that position. They've tried to round out their supporting cast a little bit. Eric Gordon has done some good things off the bench. Grayson Allen has been good. Nurkic has been dependable for the most part. But they just don't have a whole lot of options beyond, you know, they don't go too deep at all. And Vogel is relying on a lot of minutes for some of these guys. And you wonder, has this season taken a toll? It's not like everybody's played from the start to finish, but they never were able to get this sustained stretch of healthy play. They haven't had 20 straight games where everyone has been available. And I think that's hurting them right now. Now, having said that, you know, if they slip into that play-in and you got to go one and out or one and done, I like Phoenix's firepower against just about anybody that will be in the play-in because it's a one-game type situation. Now, can they sustain and last in a first-round, second-round series, a 7-game series against a younger team, especially if they're going to be towards the bottom of the standings, or a more veteran, desperate team like the Clippers or the Pelicans? That's going to be a dogfight, man. So it's going to be unpredictable. But I do like Phoenix's firepower and their upside. They just haven't been able to sustain success much at all this season.
We're talking with Mike Wallace, the senior editor of Grind City Media, here on the program. We're going to step aside and take a break. Come back. We've got more. Don't move. Keep it locked. Welcome back to the program. We're talking with Mike Wallace. He is the senior editor of Grind City Media. Give him a follow at my Mike Check. Also check him out at grindcitymedia.com. Great, absolutely great content. Everything you could possibly want, not just from the Grizzlies, not just from the NBA, but it's so much more. Mike, you talked MVP, and it's interesting because until you really mentioned it, I hadn't even given it much of a thought. So your thoughts, I mean, any number you feel like it's going to be a really, really close race.
Yeah.
Who do you like and who do you think wins it?
You know, I was just on a road trip with the Memphis Grizzlies last week, and it ended in Denver, where Nikola Jokic was playing without Jamal Murray, and you know he had to do almost everything to keep his team in it. He knew what was on his back. He went into the game starting from the very first possession and dominated. He dominated with his scoring. He dominated with his passing. He dominated with his vision, right? And you know, all it took was a quarter and a half for him to set that kind of tone. And then you look around and you're like, wow, why wouldn't this man be an MVP? Denver's back in the mix to win the Western Conference. Again, they're number one. You know, they moved up to number one. It's going to be a highly contested race over these final dozen or fewer games. But Nikola Jokic isn't doing anything that he hasn't done before. And he's the reigning finals MVP. Before that, he got another MVP. And before that, he got another MVP. So it was like, you know, this guy's had MVPs either in the finals or in the regular season over the last 3 years. He elevated himself back to the top. To me, I certainly can understand why the new fresh movement is surrounding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in Oklahoma City. This man he's had 50-plus 30-point scoring games this season. He's leading that team that was supposed to be two or 3 years away from being a true championship contender. He put them on the fast track. They would not surprise me if they make a run all the way back to the at least the Western Conference Finals, if not a surprise run to the finals. And I'm saying surprise because they're a top 2 team in the West. You know, so for me, it would go Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and then you go third. I want to go Anthony Edwards, man. Like I love what Anthony Edwards is doing in Minnesota. They've had a lot of transition on their roster. Karl Anthony Towns has been out the last, month or so. We're not sure if he's going to be able to get back. But Anthony Edwards has elevated himself into the elite premier shooting guard in the league. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has something to say about that, but he's also kind of a combo guard. When it comes to a 2 guard, Anthony Edwards does things that remind you of how explosive Michael was and how explosive Kobe Bryant was. And he does it with that same kind of pizzazz and flair, man. So those would be my top three. I would put surprisingly, I would have to go Tatum just because of the way Boston is, even though they have balance. He would be 4, and you usually have to round it out with 5. 5, my dark horse, and the guy that I'm probably just putting in here because he deserves some consideration for it, would be Jalen Brunson. Because for him to do what he's done with the Knicks, who have been injured all year, right? You know, OG Anunoby was the big-time trade target. He hadn't played much since he got there. You know what I mean? And then their big guy, their big fella, has been out for almost the last second half of the season as well, too. So, and Jalen Brunson has kept those guys in a home court advantage top 4 position in the East. So he will be my 5th as I round out my top 5 MVP.
Yeah, I love your pick. I hadn't thought of, maybe I hadn't thought about it because whenever I watch the Joker play, like for a guy to have that kind of size, to handle the ball in the way he does, to get triple doubles almost on a seemingly almost on a regular basis is absolutely unbelievable. And he's playing, I agree with you. I think he's playing well above where anybody else is playing right now. You mentioned the Thunder, and you mentioned, you mentioned that team. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Shaq. Your thoughts? Can it's a young team. They don't know any better. We saw what happened with the Kings last year. We're seeing what's happening with the Kings this year. Not the same season as it had last year. Can as a matter of fact, the Thunder make a run?
The Thunder or the Kings? I
mean, I'm sorry, not the Thunder. The Thunder, because I'm comparing them to what the Kings sort of did last year.
Last year, yes, you're right. Because the Kings last year made that late push and they were up in the top 2 and 3, right? And they sort of came out of nowhere and broke through. Oklahoma City took it all the way to the top, right? They got all the way to number 1. And that is a great comparison right there in terms of breakout young teams that figured out how to get through the regular season with that kind of energy and that fire. The thing I see about OKC that allows them to sustain it is that they're pretty good on the defensive side of the floor too. They want to compete with you defensively. You know what I mean? Chet Holmgren is a guy that, yes, he's frail in frame, but this guy is as competitive at the rim as anybody we have in this league. He's not afraid of getting dunked on, but that means he's going to block his fair share of shots too. You know, I mean, the Jalen Williams duo that they have there can play both ways. Both of those gentlemen are two-way threats, and they've just emerged. You know, Lou Dort is one of those guys that's going to be a rugged, defender. You know, I mean, one of those guys that's going to be right up at like an Anthony Mason type back in the day. You know, real rugged and strong. You know, perimeter guy that's not going to back down from anybody and is not afraid to take big shots. Kasem Wallace. I mean, they have so many guys and so many different players that they can play. The question is, once it gets into the playoffs and you have to shrink that rotation a little bit, what kind of decisions is Mark Daigneault going to have to be able to make to get those guys over the hump? But if they have a finisher like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is not afraid of any moment, they're going to always be in games because he can get to the free throw line too. So, yes, I think they can make a run. They're going to be in position to knock off one of these veteran-laden teams that has a lot of money on the salary cap. You know, one of these whoever emerges from the play-in. And we're talking about the Dallas Mavericks. We're talking about Phoenix Suns. We're talking about the Lakers, or we're talking about Golden State. OKC is going to have to vanquish one of those preeminent threats because of these Hall of Famers that they'll have on their roster. And I think Oklahoma City can do it.
A couple of more thoughts with Mike Wallace, the senior editor of Grind City Media, as we talk some NBA. What went wrong in San Antonio this year? Like, you've got Victor Wembanyama, all the hype surrounding him. I mean, he's had a good season. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's similar to when Tim Duncan first came in the league. It was not a good season. Then the Spurs kind of rolled from there. Is that what we're seeing? In other words, is there a future that looks bright for San Antonio?
You know what? I'm disappointed in San Antonio. I wasn't expecting them to compete and contend for, a middle playoff spot right away. But they should not be as bad as they are. This is an embarrassment, man. And you know what? People will be shy of going after San Antonio because of their what Popovich and the track record under R.C. Buford and those guys have been for so long. But this is like, you don't have to lose like this with a generational talent. You know what I'm saying? I go back and I look at, LeBron James. Yes, he didn't make the playoffs his first year. As a matter of fact, LeBron didn't make the playoffs his first year. Carmelo, I think, made it his first year. And Dwayne Wade, I think they either just missed it or just got there from that standpoint. But those guys were all competitive. They were winning 30-something games, for almost 40 games as rookies as transcendent players. There's no way San Antonio should be 15, 16, 17 wins at this point with Victor Wembanyama. I think that they've mismanaged how competitive he needs to be right off the bat. They could have built that roster to be a little bit more competitive. And I think, frankly, Popovich is trying to say we're learning as opposed to losing. And I think that's not the right mentality, man. And he's got to be careful. He's got to be careful because these athletes they're built different. Yes, they're going to want to get all the money they can, but they also are used to forcing their way out of situations. And I'm not saying he's going to want to get out of San Antonio. He's a global icon in terms of what Victor Wembanyama is, but there's no way that they should be losing like this when they had opportunities to put competent NBA transit role players and competent NBA frontline players around this guy, and they chose not to. And that's not a knock against what San Antonio has. I love Jeremy Sohan. You know what I mean? Trey Jones is one of these guys that will be a backup in the NBA for a long time. They have Vasil, who's going to be a fine player. But these guys aren't ready to do what Victor Wembanyama has proven that he's ready to do, and that's win a lot more than what he's been able to do. I'm sorry for going off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I just see that you're leaning on your legacy as credit to make excuses for what this team has done on the court right now. And I think that's just not, man. I hate to see that. I really do, because they could be a really, really special team building around him. And we'll see. He doesn't have much time. Pop ain't gonna be around forever. But Victor Wembanyama needs to be winning and in the NBA postseason ASAP.
Yeah, it's a good point. Switching gears real quick. The Wizards gonna stay in Washington. When that deal, it was so fuzzy when they made the announcement. Then we didn't hear anything about it. You had to figure that it wasn't going to happen. Money sometimes isn't. I think what Virginia was offering, giving Ted Leonsis and Washington Monumental, $1 billion or something like that. But look, Ted Leonsis even tweeted, we expect to be back at 85 to 90% capacity in terms of season ticket sales for the Wizards next year, which I can't believe. I mean, it's just a bad team, right? But you're going to be back at 85 to 90% ticket sales. The Capitals they're already at the 90% mark in terms of season ticket sales last year. Your thoughts? I mean, was this maybe a move on Ted Leonsis' part to get a better deal in Washington, and actually most likely the deal probably just fell through in Virginia?
I mean, he obviously used leverage. He leveraged the Virginia, the money, the landscape, and the development and all of those things against Washington, right? The inner, the city of Washington. To me, I mean, as a Washington native, you are as well too. I grew up knowing that it was a region's team, right? So, when I grew up, the Redskins were in Landover and the Bullets were in DC, right? Now it's switched out, right? So it was like, the Bullets were in Landover and the Redskins were in DC. And now the Commanders are out in Maryland and the Wizards are now downtown in Washington. And you just, and now you got Virginia in play. Like the Commanders, their headquarters is in Virginia, their stadium is in Maryland, and they're called the Washington franchise, right? So what I'm saying is that I don't get too caught up in a whole lot of that. It did seem messy. I think politics got involved. People were talking about money that they weren't ready to commit to or didn't have. And ultimately, I didn't see a problem with where the arena is, whatever they're calling it now. It's been a whole lot of different names. I don't want to mispronounce what that center is, where the Wizards are playing and the Capitals play. But it's great real estate. They just have to put more money into it. It still is a beautiful place. And if you build up around it, which they did initially, they just have to continue to pump some more money in there. And I think ultimately the district will get it done. But Virginia is a viable threat because it's not like you're going 40 miles away. It's not like in San Francisco where the 49ers don't play anywhere near downtown San Francisco. This is, if they went to Virginia, you're still only talking maybe 6 miles from where they actually are playing right now. They're just going across the bridge, if that's the case. But, you know, we'll see, man. I think when you talk about $1 billion and you're throwing around these figures, there's a lot more I's that need to be dotted and T's crossed before you can actually move an NBA franchise from one municipality to the other.
Mike Wallace, the senior editor of Grind City Media. Give him a follow on Twitter, or X as it were, at MyMikeCheck. Also check out his the great content that Grind City Media does at grindcitymedia.com as he talks some NBA with us here on the program. Appreciate the time, Mike. As always, we look forward to catching up with you and talking some more NBA real soon.
Hey, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it, Donald. Looking forward to it as well.